Ngā hui, we're back to hearings, councillors. Councillors, we're back to, we're back. Excuse me.
Sorry.
I would like to welcome our first submitter for the day, Sean Rush. Haere mai, welcome home, Sean. You have 15 minutes, including time for questions.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that warm welcome, Madam Chair. Hello to councillors. I will be as quick as I can. I did do a personal submission on the water reforms, and then I did a submission on the LTP from my firm as an organisation, and Sophie and the team sort of figured I'd just do 15 minutes and cover whatever you want, but I hope to not take anything like that length of time. Just starting on water services, so the current plan looks very similar to what Wellington City Council actually submitted, I think, in about 2022, where we unanimously agreed to go along the similar sort of lines to what's been proposed. I'm very concerned that we might be moving too quickly. I think that having now seen some of the governance issues more fulsomely that have come out of how the Wellington Water Committee has operated, and also to see some of the operational aspects and deficiencies that have been thrown to light after a number of different reports, it seems clear to me that the City Council needs to take a lead, and I would support that we engage with an experienced water engineer that we used to have on council, and what we need to do is to actually get a real handle on what our assets look like, what the forward plan is, make sure our top 10 critical pieces of infrastructure have really rigorous, robust, industry-leading asset management plans, and then we could have a kōrero with our neighbours. And that might take, I don't think that'll take the year, I think, which is the current timeline. I think there's a couple of years work in that. And that way we can then have a really good discussion with our neighbours, knowing what we do about so I just think we need to really get a handle on what our assets look like. And instead of throwing money at Wellington Water, let's throw some money at some internal resource. So here I am, spend more money. It's my first offer. So that's water reforms. I'm just going to go through a list of a bit of a brain dump, really. Fiscal responsibility rates. I think we do need to stabilise rates. So mine have gone up from 8,000 a year to 16,000 a year from 2013 to last year. That's unaffordable for a lot of people, and it's it's $300 a week. And to see that that's not going to change and will be an ongoing trend is quite heart-stopping for a lot of our residents. At the same time, in the press, I've seen reports of a 50% increase in staff costs. I think Councillor Young used to keep a record of the increased positions on ELT. I'm not here to single out any particular groups and so on, but I do think we need to start thinking about reducing the staff, and that could be by way of a hiring freeze, if you like, something for the CEO, who I'm assuming Matt's listening somewhere. Climate initiatives. My views on climate change. I've got a master's in the subject. I'm quite, shall we say, guarded about the impacts, particularly here in Wellington. It's a global issue, but the NIWA reports show pretty much not much going on here in Wellington. Despite last week's big winds, actually the maximum wind speeds have been decreasing, which is good news, I suppose, I don't know. The sea level actually seems to be about where it was in 2016. I expect that it'll rebound at some point. But I think that we need to continue our focus really on adaptation, and particularly the South Coast seawalls, Owhiro Bay in particular, near and dear to my heart. So maybe a refocus. The insurance headroom issue, I struggle a little bit, Madam Chair, to understand that, because if the big one hits, we're not just going to carry on with the long-term plan anyway. We'll completely radically ditch it and actually pull back whatever resources we have to help people. So I just feel that this idea that we need a fund in case the big one hits really presupposes that we won't do other things. So I'm just a little bit sceptical that that's a valid reason to really focus this LTP on. That said, though, and this will be controversial, I know, I support selling the Wellington Airport shares. I know that there's And I remember from the time last time that it's a public asset, but it's not. It's a private asset. It's shares in a private company. But, I know that argument's been had. But, I think, reinvesting those in things like water meters, and I think there's got to be a place for water meters, and that's a real great subject to have as a public-private partnership. I know that's a dirty word for some people, but they do work. In fact, I reckon that iwi would be interested in that sort of arrangement, because everyone has to use water, so there's guaranteed. Anyway, I won't do it, but I think we could better deploy our asset in the Wellington Airport shares into something else. Water meters being one. Cycleway infrastructure. As you remember, some of you will remember, I voted for the increased budget in cycleways, but it wasn't an all or nothing sort of thing. It was always, for me, I recognised that there might be a need to defer or to restructure. I also felt that actually the added budget actually would provide an opportunity for officers to do something really fabulous and wonderful, and not just take away road space from other road users. So I've been disappointed that didn't happen. But I would say that we need to really test the cycle network or the obvious parts against the European standards for slope and gradient, because the Europeans, it's quite flat in Copenhagen and in the Netherlands, and so they are very cognizant of slopes that actually can become a physical barrier for folks. And here in Wellington, that's pretty obvious, particularly where I live in Roseneath. Mata Moana Reserve. For many years, in fact, the 3 years I was on council, I tried very hard to get to the bottom of what was happening in the Heritage Park. But it was sort of like just no one would give me any information. And we've got a lot of residents out of Miramar who have got incredibly good ideas about what could happen out there. And groups are agitating, but they're not being spoken to. And, Madam Chair, you'll remember the Shelley Bay sort of stuff, and that was the same thing, fast track, dirty word then, dirty word now, and people not being listened to. So I'd just really like to advocate that, we need to start that conversation. Should have started some years ago. Once again, people in Miramar are thinking that things are being done to them, not with them. But otherwise, a good idea. Councillor Foon, you're going to hate me for this, but, we need to be fiscally responsible. I struggle with the waste minimisation program. I think it's $50 million. I might be wrong about that. But I sort of go, why can't people put their scraps in the compost like what we used to, which is what I do. And I also sort of look at this from a climate perspective, whether an orange peel breaks down in my backyard or breaks down in some place in, I don't know, Palmerston North or whatever, it doesn't really make a difference to the climate or even in the landfill. So I struggle a wee bit. I understand, I think, waste minimisation and organics, I think, is where I'm coming from, as opposed to waste minimisation in terms of construction equipment and stuff, which I think are really the big movers when it comes to landfill. Social housing portfolio. We all know that Wellington's the largest social housing provider in the country outside of the government. It's really a government service, and it's placing a really disproportionate financial burden on folks who have been prudent enough to save, purchase their own homes, pay off a mortgage, and then the council says, well, you also need to pay for some other people who have not been quite so, well, should we say lucky, but possibly prudent or otherwise. I think the council should consider instituting a sinking lid, if you like, on social housing, so that as properties become vacated, they are not refilled. They are actually, and we bring that down to something that's a bit more equivalent proportionately to the metros like Auckland and Christchurch. I would note actually that in Tahino Road, Miramar, there's a half a dozen empty homes that have been empty for years, city council homes, some photographs there, and either they should be populated with people or else they should be sold, and at probably about $600,000-700,000 each. So something to have a look at. The second Mount Vic Tunnel, I know that some people around the table probably won't support it, but the government's made a commitment and they're going to get started on it. I would encourage you to review what the town of Bergen in Norway did when they made their CBD into a walkable area, which, by the way, Bob Jones, the late Bob Jones, supported as well. I don't know if Councillor Pannett, she's not here, but Councillor Pannett, Councillor Paul and I went to see Bob Jones, a little story, and he said, over his red wine, I think it's a great idea. Let's make it all lower Lambton Quay walkable. So, big stakeholder. We don't really know if he was serious or not. But nevertheless, if you look at the Bergen experiment, what they did was they built new infrastructure. They built car parking in the city fringes, and that freed up the inner city to be much more walkable and pleasant for folks. So something I'd leave and that could be rolled into, with the right amount of lobbying, the government's project, right? So it could be a government project that brings that sort of flexibility for folks who need to drive their cars to work. And I know this is not going to go down well with my Labor colleagues, but the living wage subsidy here in Wellington is a bit of a bonus. It's not really actually providing the sort of benefit, I think, to the people that really need it. So you've got people like my niece who live with her dad, gets a gig at an event that Wellington City Council's providing, and she gets a little bonus. It's not really what was envisaged by the living wage, I don't think. So I'm just not sure whether it's doing what we expected it to do. So maybe have another look at that. As I say, won't be popular with the Labor Party, but I've never been popular with the Labor Party. Anyway, that's my submissions. There's a few minutes left. I'm happy to take any questions, but otherwise, good luck, folks.
Thank you. We do have some questions. The first from Pauiwi Hohaia.
Kia ora, Sean. Thank you for that. I just want to pick up on a point you made in your submission on Mātai Moana, where you seem to be suggesting that there's some sort of application of a principle of customary Māori land tenure. What's your understanding of the principles of customary Māori land tenure as they apply here in Te Whanganui-a-Tara?
That's a big question, really, Hoipea. I don't think I mentioned...
it's Holden.
Sorry, Holden. I don't think I do mention customary land title in this. What I am saying, I think the consultation document suggested that iwi here have ancestral connections to the peninsula when they arrived, as you know, in around the 1820s and 1830s, and displaced the folks that had been living here for several hundred years. So I think that was the point I was making. It's not to say that there's not a role for iwi. It was just basically trying to correct that record.
So just a quick follow-up on that. Are you familiar with the Waitangi Tribunal report, Te Whanganui-a-Tara me ona takiwā, where the tribunal confirmed that the iwi with ahi kā here in Pōneke were and still are Te Atiawa, Ngāti Tama, Taranaki, Ngāti Ruanui and Ngāti Mutunga, and that they continue to hold ahi kā?
I am familiar with it, but at different parts of it. It's a big report. They all are. The interesting part about that, Holden, is actually as a descendant of an early settler, our stories paint a little bit of a different picture. A great relationship with Te Atiawa, who were actually under threat by Ngāti Toa in the region, and actually a great alliance formed between the settlers and your iwi, and we should be celebrating that.
Kapai. Thank you.
Quick question from Councillor Randall.
Yes, I'm intrigued by your suggestion around having car parks ring the city and making the city accessible to enable it to have more people to come in, but still enable pedestrianisation and public transport. I was wondering, the council has a very down view on any car parks anywhere.
Quick question, Councillor.
So the question is, are people from the east, when it becomes hard to get into town, are they switching away from cars, or are they just stopping coming?
I honestly don't know. I would have to say, Councillor Randall, that since COVID, the traffic from the east has been significantly different and improved. And the routes, both around the bays and through the tunnel, are well used. So I don't think people I can't answer that without looking at cycle data and public transport data, and so I wouldn't venture.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're out of time, Sean. I just wanted to say those houses in Miramar, when we do up to the upgrades, they're going to be, people that move are going to be in there. So just wanted to give you a bit of reassurance there.
Good luck, folks. Take it.
Thank you so much for taking the time, Sean. I'd like to next welcome Con Anastasiou. I hope I'm not butchering your surname. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. And
a lot more successful butcheries.
You have 5 minutes, and if you want to leave any time for questions as part of that, you can. Thank you.
Fine. So what I've done, councillors, good morning. I've prepared some written submissions, and I don't know whether I'm going to get through all of those in the time available, but I can leave hard copies of them behind for you.
Lovely.
So just before I start reading my written submissions, can you hear me without a microphone?
No, we need the microphone because we have some people online and
Record me for posterity, right? Yes, thank you. Just before I read my submissions, and as I say, I may not get through all of them, in which case I'd be obliged if you could read them somewhere down the track. Just to establish my credentials, I'm a barrister and solicitor and have been in practice in Wellington for pretty much all of my life. I live here. I have an office in Brandon Street, which is just off Courtney Place. And the reason I'm mentioning these things to you is because they're relevant to what I'm about to say about the issues. I cross Lambton Quay and walk up and down it pretty much every day of my working life. I have specialised in resource management law and local government law. I was a commissioner in the approval of the stadium, and I chaired the commissioners who declined resource consent to demolish the South British building and 2 other heritage buildings alongside it. So I've got a long history with the city. You don't see as much of me now because sadly we don't have a lot of hearings anymore like we used to do in the past. Now, the order of these submissions is not in order of my choosing, but it follows the sequence in the documentation that I completed. So first of all, insurance and investment risks, which is a thorny old chestnut. I'm not satisfied that there would be an insurance shortfall of the order of 1.8 billion to 2.6 billion in the event of a major disaster. I understand that the modelling is based on a replacement concept, both as far as buildings and infrastructure are concerned. Past experience in other localities which have been sadly afflicted by major catastrophes indicate that this is unlikely to happen, and the rebuild work would incorporate modern systems and materials and would probably be tailored to a budget. The reality of it is that central government will not abandon the city and will implement recovery strategies as became evident in Christchurch. Wellington is, after all, the seat of government, and that fact alone will result in a joint assumption of responsibility. That's not to say that we should abdicate that responsibility, but it's just a matter of being realistic about what actually happens in these cases, both in New Zealand and overseas. While I can understand the need for diversification to achieve a spread of risk, I believe that further evaluation is required before assets are realised to prevent a perceived shortfall. Even if all the council shares in Wellington Airport and all the ground leases were sold, they would only realise just over 500 million on the council's own valuations. This is well and truly short of the council's stated insurance shortfall of the order of 1.8 to 2.6 billion. Given the air gap, the amount which would be potentially realised and the exposures, another strategy is required. Now, I don't have that strategy for you now, but all I'm saying is that if one is to try and create a fund of some kind, one needs to be aware that there are global shocks which will affect that fund, like the Trump effect. Hopefully that will dissipate very shortly, especially now that we have an American, a Pope who is of American origin in the first instance, even though he spent most of his time in darkest Peru with Paddington Bear, as I understand it. It should also be categorically clear that any fund which is established to address any insurance shortfall should not be available under any circumstances to meet operational requirements. And I make this comment because whilst I was observing from a distance the controversy over the sale of the airport shares, I was quite confused as to whether or not that fund would be available in certain circumstances to meet operational requirements, would be simply sequestered, all right? So all I'm saying is that the creation of such a fund has the potential to be uncertain, has the potential to cause pain without achieving the correct result, and needs further evaluation. The next matter I want to address, and I'm sorry to be racing through this, but I'm conscious of the time limit, is Begonia House. I'm a regular frequenter of the Botanical Gardens, always with good intent. And what I say to you is that, in my opinion, Begonia House is one of the most critical components of the gardens and is part of the mosaic and variation which makes the gardens such a draw card for both residents and visitors alike, both past and present. I don't know if you're familiar with this tome here, which is a book, but it's a book which is called Botanic Gardens, Wellington, A New Zealand History, 1840 to 1986. And the authors are somebody with the delightful name of Winsome Shepherd and Walter Cook. If you haven't seen this book, I commend it to you. It is a tome. It is a stunning record. And what is even more important is that a lot of it actually talks about your former personnel.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but 5 minutes goes very quick and we are out of time. If there's a final point you'd like to make?
Well, I haven't even started.
I'm so sorry.
How did Mr. Rush get 15 minutes?
Because he made multiple submissions, right, and one on behalf of an organisation. I'm so sorry.
All right, okay. Well, that's very disappointing because I was only just getting wound up. Can I, with your indulgence, just quickly run through a few short points, all right? Before doing that, I just want to read a quote to you from this book here, all right?
I actually think, I'm so sorry, we're out of time.
Right.
If there's just a final point you'd like to emphasise?
Okay, well, Begonia House, you've got to keep it. It would be criminal to destroy it. Bike network, a disaster. Needs to be revisited and needs to be completely redone. City Streets project, the Golden Mile is not broken. Courtney Place certainly needs attention. Every part of the so-called Golden Mile has its own characteristics, has to be treated differently. One of the worst bits of it is that section from Cuba Street to Willow Street, which is, and Councillor Brown will relate to this, which has got a history of accidents repeatedly, or that's not where his was. Water well done. In my view, the option that I would commend to you is the option which you may find a little bit difficult to consider, is where you actually, this council, sets up its own sole purpose company and staffs it with competent professionals and focuses on the needs of Wellington itself.
I'm really sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off there. Thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time. Yes, if you leave them with our staff here, Can
I ask you to read them?
Yes, you can. Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Next time I'll ask for half an hour.
We'll do our best.
Or half a day.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome Gareth Thomas to the podium. And similarly, you have a paltry 5 minutes. I will reset the clock. Thank you.
I'll be brief because I'm not a lawyer. Anyone else getting deja vu? I am. Good morning, Atamarie. My name is Gareth Thomas. I'm an inner city resident. I just want to thank you for your ongoing civic service, because I know that you're sitting where very few of us would want to sit. So I really appreciate that. So quite simply, I support option 1 on the long-term plan amendment. I think that some of your officers have given you some very smart information here, with insurance costs being hideously high and a broken model. In my view, your recommendation to shift to more what you call self-insurance is very smart indeed. I support the reduction in capital spending to increase borrowing capacity and therefore increase headroom. However, I do wish that the proposed changes to the capital projects list was longer. I think you could have been bolder and more savage and give me a break from some of these killer rate rises which I'm experiencing year after year. So examples of that, I don't see the Golden Mile on that list as an option. I don't understand, and I'm not going to look you in the eye at this point, Ben, I don't understand why the council is working on plans which might see us hitching the council horse to the Johnsonville Mall redevelopment. I just don't know why it's on that list, why it's not on that list. And with fewer projects to manage, I would imagine there should be a corresponding drop in the number of staff numbers, but that's also not an option on the table. Again, thank you for your service and time, and best wishes for the next steps. Thank you.
Any questions? If you'd like to take a question, Gareth, Councillor Chung has one first.
Thanks very much for coming in, Gareth.
Thank you, Councillor.
Looking at you mentioned some capital projects, but also looking at some of the things that we're actually doing, where would you suggest we actually make the cuts apart from the capital project that you've actually just mentioned?
I think really it's, I know you're sick of hearing this, but just if you focus on the basics, then everything on that outer circle, you'll know what they are. I don't want to say what they are specifically, because I've made the rookie mistake of not talking for my 5 minutes and therefore receiving questions. But yes, that's basics. Okay. Thank you.
And it's entirely up to you if you want to answer questions, but we do have one more from Councillor Randall. Okay, thank you.
Hi, Councillor.
You're a bit sceptical what happens in the Johnsonville Mall. Do you have any other ideas about what we could do to enable or prompt or change that, even just off the wall? Because
yeah, off the wall. So I asked some friends and colleagues about this. I said, because who live up there, and they said it needs to be bold. That was their response, and I understand that the council wants to provide services, and I think they should be standalone services. I don't think we should be getting into bed with those kind of businesses, and I think it just needs to go.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Lovely to see you. Thanks for taking the time. I'd now like to welcome Mary Trance. No, my Mary, and you also have 5 minutes. And if you want to leave any of that for questions, you can, but you don't have to.
That's all right. My husband may have to take over because I'm recovering from bronchitis. Right. I'm Mary Trance, and I live in the northern suburbs. Now, the thing that really annoyed me most in all of this was the Kōrau Event Centre. Now, I don't actually live in Kōrau, but if a group raises money, builds a building, gives it to the council on the basis they're going to fit it out, and then the council decides at a later date they're just going to not do that and then sell it off, I'd be furious. I'd be absolutely ropeable. The council has a duty to the residents of Kōrau and the rest of Wellington to complete this project. Once complete, this facility is likely to be highly used not just by Kōrau residents but by residents across the city. It must be particularly galling to the residents to have a cycleway built that they voted against, and the threat of demolition of a much anticipated event centre. Now, by following the now I want to ask, if you follow the options outlined that would sell the site, says to the residents of Wellington that the council reneges on its obligations, and that if a community raises funds for a specific purpose, or the proposal that any property acquired but be donated to the council for benefit of the community as a whole, it is in all probability going to be sold to fill council coffers. So I then ask, since the trust contributed more than $3 million to the building of this much needed facility, if the council sells it, as their proposal is, then will this money be returned to the trust? Because your plan talked about only $1 million. Also, moving on to the Begonia House, it is a jewel in the gardens of Wellington and is a favourite for residents and visitors. On a recent visit to Pukakura Park in New Plymouth, we actually met some of their gardeners. And when we said we were from Wellington, that was the first thing they mentioned. They're very impressed by it. So why would we demolish it? It would be a very short-sighted move. Now, moving on to where we could save some money, I would suggest that stopping all work on cycleways would free up funds for other projects. And no more work should be done until a cost-benefit analysis is done. The current cycleways have seen closure of some businesses and downturn in business for others. Often these businesses rely on their customers to park close by. And the council doesn't seem to understand that Wellington is not a great city for cycling. It's very hilly, very windy, and often raining. I mean, today we had to drive our car to the bus stop to get the bus in. Now, the cycleways have also made me feel less safe as a pedestrian and a motorist. I recently went to Thorndon New World for the first time since this were implemented. Found it difficult turning in, and I found it very difficult turning out of there. You could also save money by not doing the Golden Mile development, and may I suggest you clean up the Cuba Mall before you pedestrianise anything else. It's absolutely grotty. You've also got to consider, if you remove cars from these areas, what are you going to do about the disabled that need to be dropped outside the door? They can't walk the distances you're asking them to. Moving on, the rates increases are making the city unaffordable. They've increased at a rate far above the rate of inflation. And in the last 2 years, it's gone up 33.7%. My husband did the calculations. This has an impact not only directly on the ratepayers, but also it flows on and affects those that are paying rent, because landlords can't absorb all these costs. Now, the average income is only raised 11%. The council needs to learn to live within its means and the means of its ratepayers and work on the basics, fix things, and not indulge in any new projects until we've fixed up what's not working now.
Very quick, Councillor Randall. No, I think we'll give you. We're about out of time, Mary, and I also want to give your throat a rest. I hope you're feeling better soon. Thank you for taking the time to come and share your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
To welcome Claire Carruthers on behalf of Wellington Free Ambulance. Welcome, Claire, and you have 10 minutes. If you want to leave any time for questions during that time, you're welcome to do so. Over to you.
Thank you. I believe we were going to have some slides on the wall today.
We received.
They were sent through.
We're just checking. Well, let's stop the clock.
Because they're part of my presentation. I can't do it without them. Or I can, but.
Sorry, we're just checking on that for you, Claire. We don't seem to have received them. Should we take a 5 minutes break and we see if you could resend them?
Is that all right? And I'll
Yes,
stick to
we'll
time.
we'll come back. We'll take a 5 minute break and we'll come back and do that. Thank you. Back to you, Claire. Thank you.
Hi, so I'm Claire from Wellington Free Ambulance, and thank you so much for the opportunity to present to you today. I moved to Wellington 17 years ago, and it is an honour and a privilege to serve Wellington Free Ambulance, and I am the biggest champion for Wellington. I'm very happy that my travelling legs landed me here. And thank you for all the work that you do. So we've got a few slides today. I'm going to take you through 3 slides with information that you'll all know. And then I'm just going to do a few slides of information that you might not know about. So normally when I give these presentations, I've spoken to quite a few members of this group at different community events and functions. And normally what I do is I try to hit you right between the heartstrings and I give you real patient stories of real lives that we've saved. But today I'm just going to be fact-based, and I really want you to see and understand the volume of work that Wellington Free Ambulance is currently undertaking. So, I do the slides. Second slide, this is our region. So we are unique, and it sounds, crazy. You know this. Why are we unique? We are the only free emergency ambulance service, and we're incredibly proud of being a free emergency ambulance service. We cover a vast region because we are urban, we are rural, we are mountains, we are sea, we are city, we are small lanes, we are parks, rivers. We cover everything in a small region, and we are a staff of 500 people that make up Wellington Free. Serve 500,000 people. So one of my biggest takeaways, we are a small service with a mighty, mighty impact. And the next slide, you're all going to know this gentleman, so I'm sure you all know who Sir Charles Norwood is. So our purpose and our vision has been the same for nearly 100 years. There would be no Wellington Free without our founding partnership with this council. It is vital to the health infrastructure of this city and our region that we continue to provide equitable and accessible emergency health care. I'm not going to go into the story of how Sir Charles Norwood founded Wellington Free Ambulance with a patient lying on Lambton Quay, but if you don't know it, do look it up, or I can come and tell you about it later. It's a wonderful, wonderful story. All right, the next slide is going into the data. So this is, it's very small. So this is our impact. This is what we do in our region every year. These are statistics from our last financial year, which we do June to July, 2023 to 2024. So what I'd like you to do, as you can see on your screens, when you look at these vast figures, so nearly 55,000 incidents attended in a 12-month period, I want you to put a face to those 55,000, to that figure of 55,000. These are not just figures, these are faces. This is you, this is your brother, this is your sister, your mother, your father, your uncle, this is your far now. And when you look at these figures, I'd like you to times them by 10, because that is the true impact that we have on this community and our region. When we save one life or look after and change a life, we are actually looking after their community, their partnership, their family. So we always say those figures times by 10. Just as a side note, we did do a social return on investment, on investing into Wellington Free Ambulance, and we came out at $250 million is our social return on investment. Every dollar invested in Wellington Free Ambulance equates to $5.60 in our city. So I have an impact report that was externally done, and I can send that to Council for further reading. Next up is all the hard facts and hard and fun facts. So I won't read it all out. You've got it there, but I'll highlight a few key points. So just within Wellington City Council in our region, with a population of nearly 210,000 residents, there is a need for all our services. I underline all because we are so much more than lights and sirens. We have 4 or 5 other critical services that operate out of Wellington Free Ambulance. We attend nearly 17,000 incidents in Wellington City Council region in the past year. That is 44 emergencies per day. Due to demand and population size, we operate 3 stations within this region, Newtown, Thorndon and Johnsonville. We have 9 stations across our entire region. We operate one of 3 clinical communication centres in New Zealand. So just down where I've walked from in Thorndon, that's one of your 3 clinical communication centres where all 111 calls nationally come into. And last year, our own clinical communication centre in this region answered nearly 250,000 111 calls. Our event medical services team provide critical support at large events held in the capital. For example, FIFA Women's World Cup and Jim Beam Homegrown, but also grassroots netball, hockey, rugby. So we go across the scale providing medical support. And last point on this slide is a priority for the Wellington City Council long-term plan is the improved city safety at night. We're incredibly proud that we partnered with New Zealand Police, and on a Friday and Saturday night, mainly in Courtney Place, we assisted police and looked after our community. And with that, we responded, which police can't do, our people do. We responded to 467 medical incidents, and that resulted in 362 ambulances and ED, our emergency department visits, avoided. So that's a massive thing. We are innovation. We have solutions. We know how to serve our region, and we can help healthcare systems elsewhere by an investment in the ambulance service. Next page of fun facts. Last one. So why do we need for funding? So financially, this next financial year, we will need to raise $10 million. That is meeting the shortfall of what we receive from funding and what we require to fundraise. We have a fantastic fundraising strategy, and we get incredible support from our community. Wellington City Council population accounts for 39% of the total population in our region. Wellington City Council funding represents around 25% of the total council funding we receive. Back to our clinical communications centre, 30% of those 111 calls comes from our region, comes from Wellington. And our emergency ambulance jobs account for approximately 30%. So Wellington City Council region is, due to population, is our biggest demand and has the biggest demand on our resources as an ambulance service. Looking at costs, these are averages. An emergency ambulance job average costs around $650. So this equates to around $10.5 million to run the service within the Wellington City Council region. On top of that, we've got the running costs of our 3 stations. But if you just hold that figure, $10.5 million is what emergency ambulance services cost within our region to meet our demand. And we are free, we're accessible, we're equitable. And the funding that we require from Wellington City Council, if possible, it is a 50% increase. So for sustainable council funding and to cement our 100-year partnership, we are asking for a 50% increase. So not 10.5 million, just 209,000 a year. That's what we're asking from this council. I know how stretched every dollar in the council is, and I know how many amazing organisations who do amazing work are also asking for funding. But hand on heart, there is no other charity or organisation that needs this funding more. We are a vital service to the health and well-being of our people. The next slide just shows about the figures. So what we're asking is for every council, not just Wellington City Council, but every council to fund $1 per head in their region. There are only 3 councils not funding the $1 per head. One is Carterton, one is Kapiti, but historically Kapiti have always funded us really well. They've just had a very quick increase in population, so we are in conversations with them and their plans, and then Wellington City Council at 0.49 cents. And we would just be delighted, honoured, thrilled if you were able to find the funds to raise to $209,000 a year. And this is per population, per head per population. You can see from the previous statistics that Wellington City Council is where most of our resources go and where a majority of our demand is. And I can send you all of these figures. And I hope today you're interested in the hard facts, because everyone likes the patient story. But I just wanted to really share with you, whilst I had you in person, about our amazing service and how much we love serving our community and our region, and how proud we are to be partnered with Wellington City Council, founded by Wellington City Council, and the only free emergency ambulance service in the country. And on my very, very final thank you, as I implore you to look at these facts again and see how they represent the health of our people. And ambulance, it is innovative, it is fast-paced, we are passionate, we are made up of a skilled, clinically registered workforce who need your help. Thank you very much.
Thank you. One quick question from Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much for coming, Claire. One question I'd like to ask is that the patient transfer service, what do ambulance services in the rest of the country do? Do they actually charge that to the health department? Or do they?
Our patient transfer services are all contracted through health departments. So ours, we have relationships with all of our health departments and they are funded, but none of our vehicles are funded. So we have to fundraise for all of our patient transfer vehicles and in fact all of our ambulances. So no capital items with emergency vehicles. are funded through government or ACC. They're all philanthropically funded through fundraising strategies and community partnerships and trusts and foundations. But we do around 45,000 patient transfers per year just within our region, and a majority of those jobs are for dialysis patients.
Great, thank you. And I think you do a great job. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you very much. Oh, I'm out of time. Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire. I just wanted to check. Benjamin Sutherland, you're here. Would you like to speak now? Because we have a gap. It's up to you. We can have a break. No, come up and do it now. That'd be great. Thank you so much. So looking, I think we've allotted you 5 minutes. Thank you. Thanks for being flexible with the timing. I just thought you were here. It means you can go out and enjoy this beautiful weather if you want to afterwards.
It was better this morning. Down at Wakefield Park this morning at about 6 o'clock. It was just flooding everywhere. It was amazing. Right. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for the opportunity to speak today. I am a Newtown resident. I'm also a residential landlord and a commercial landlord. Recently...
Sorry, could I please have quiet in the gallery? Sorry, it's hard for us to hear. We want to hear you, sorry.
Yeah. So, recently, I have started operating a small Airbnb in Newtown. And like many others, a change in circumstances meant that it was the right thing to do for our family. Since then, we've found it not only personally meaningful, but also a great use to our community. Our Airbnb is a one-bedroom flat in a dual flat property. It's 2 one-bedroom flats. It's not a tourism business, and we focus on medium-term stays. Typically, our guests stay between 2 and 12 weeks. Over time, over the last couple of years, we've seen that this is a reasonably large gap in the Wellington housing market. Our gross income is slightly higher than having a long-term rental. But we also have GST, platform services, wages for the employment for the people who clear out the apartment. But in the end, our net profit is exactly the same. The 2 units make the same return on investment for us. The difference is that we're able to offer some flexibility, offer some dignified traditional housing changes, and it's not a hotel room. So just thinking about the numbers in Newtown, we've got the Sojo Hotel, we've got the Accor Motor Lodge, and the Southgate Motor Inn. So these hotels, motels, rates of between $1,000 per room and $2,000 per room. The Bella Vista around Evans Bay, which is quite a nice spot, they pay $2,500 per room. This is in contrast to our residential property at the moment, where we currently pay $3,000 for our 2 bedrooms. The proposed changes would increase this to $11,000 per room, significantly more than what the existing Newtown hotel and motel providers are paying. And so this isn't just about my property, this is about everyday Wellingtonians. I'm not struggling to make ends meet, but there are a lot of Airbnb people that are. I think these changes that the council are proposing would really be detrimental to Wellington. When we started hosting, we were expecting doctors, locums and nurses from the hospital to come in, but we have found that the majority of people are grandparents from overseas visiting their newborn grandchildren. Their daughters or sons have, mainly daughters, have migrated from overseas and they don't have any local whānau. We've had a few separate parents that have separated and wanting to stay close to their families. And we've also had a request from Wellington Free Ambulance for one of their new staff to stay in our accommodation. Recently, because we're in Newtown, the guest that's turning up today is staying for us for a couple of weeks to visit their dying relative in the Mary Pot Hospice. So putting these extra charges on this particular type of unit will really have a detrimental impact on basically our Wellington community. They're wanting a gross rent without power, without internet, and they're wanting to pay a gross rent with power and internet and cleaning included. And that's not something you can do if you have a short term, if you're looking for a long-term lease. Cool, thank you.
Yeah, we do. We have a question from Councillor Wineta, so we'll take that.
Kia ora. So, as a motel operator, I suppose, why is the Airbnb model preferable to pick up that sort of short to medium stay lobby as opposed to just incorporating it as a motel?
I mean, it's a home rather than a hotel room. I mean, you get a hotel room, we've got a kitchen, we've got a laundry, we've got a nice bathroom, we've got a living area. If you're in a hotel room, it's probably a small box. So if you're staying there for a longer period, 6 weeks, you're actually just wanting a little bit more freedom. Answer your question? Yeah.
Thank you so much. We really want to thank you for taking the time to come and speak with us, Benjamin. Thanks. We appreciate it. Okay, all right, now we have a break and we will come back at 12:15. So if you're ready at the table at 12:15, that would be great. Thank you, councillors. I'd like to now welcome our next submitter, Warwick Taylor, on behalf of the Wellington Residents Coalition. No, my Warwick. You have 10 minutes, and if you want to leave any time for questions during those 10 minutes. Can we please stop the side conversations, councillors? Thank you.
Organised of both myself and Graham Clark to speak on behalf of the Wellington Residents Coalition. What you decide today will not, or what you decide in the next month will not only determine what happens next year, what happens in 10 years, but in generations. I've got a couple of preliminary points to make. The first is expanding on that point. The City to Sea Bridge. I remember when it was built and complaining that, yeah, nice bridge to build, but what about the rubbish people you laid off and contracted out? And I also thought at the time, and in 87 when they mooted it, building another administration building, why don't we just use like Anvil House, which was already being used? And what happens? 30 years later, we have no building. It's been demolished. So these decisions have impacts a long way in the future. Second point is the way the consultation documents are worded gives people an impression that they must choose one of however many options. That's not true. You might have a compromise between options or a totally different option, and I'm going to talk about that soon. Now to specifically, we want to talk about asset sales. If you go back 40 years, Wellington City Council owned the milk treatment plant. It owned the abattoir. It owned a number of car parking buildings. It owned, of course, the MED. You know what happened over the last weekend with communication. So these assets were assets that had a history behind them. And there were two reasons for proposing to sell these assets. One is about investment, and the other is about insurance. Let's look, and I know I'm going in a different order from the consultation document. Let's look at the idea of investment. I don't consider the assets that are up for grabs to be there for investment. We shouldn't be being suggested to, or maybe dictated to, by a ratings agency. Those assets are our assets because they have a history. In particular, I'm going to talk about ground leases. Ground leases, if we have a disaster, are not likely to lose value. Maybe the people renting the lease from us at the time may no longer be able to operate whatever they're operating, but that piece of ground is effectively owned by us, the city's residents. And that piece of ground, if the people who were occupying that ground in a disaster, they may move on, but we as a collective community may have some use for that ground. So I believe it's unwise to sell ground leases because we're going to end up having to pay rent if we have to use another piece of ground as a community. The insurance, as we've pointed out in our submission, you've got three options for self-insuring. If you self-insure with the low option, then the money will probably be quite quickly used up. in low impact but high probability events such as storms. And that, just as a side point, even if you get insurance money for that, it's not going to necessarily pay for some remediation that might need to be determined to happen. For example, a new retaining wall that you didn't have before. Secondly, the other option, the full option, if we have a disaster, a major earthquake, even the self-insurance won't pay for it. And I know this is a bit cynical, but with the Christchurch earthquake, the government did stump up with a bit of money. And maybe that's, in reality, what will have to happen. So that's, in summary, I think you've got to think about how what you decide now is not only going to impact on tomorrow, 10 years' time, 20 years' time, but 30 or 40 years' time. Thank you.
Yes, a question from Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much for coming, Warwick. Much appreciated. So you've listed a few things that you think that we should actually do. What do you think are the things that we should actually look at either deferring or not doing to take out of the long-term plan to actually pay for some of these things?
Well, I think you could defer some things. We don't have a specific stance on what could be deferred, but some perhaps renewals or new initiatives could be deferred a bit. One thing you could look at, and it's not Residents Coalition policy, but maybe you could look at the collective conscience of people who've got a little bit of money, and instead of having a self-insurance fund that's an investments fund, maybe build up an independent investment fund by raising debentures or some sort of long-term bonds and have a growth fund that you can pay them back, but the growth, the interest and the capital expand. That could be another option, rather than selling what you have, because once you've sold it and a big disaster happens, you'll have nothing left to sell. As I say, the number of assets we've got as a community is a hell of a lot less than it was 40 years ago. We've seen things just go down, being sold successively.
We have another question from Councillor Pennant.
Thank you, Warwick. Really appreciate you coming in and obviously sympathies towards your ideas about retaining assets. But do you think councils need to own things like abattoirs and car parks, which have got serious ethical implications?
Yeah,
would
absolutely.
As
a vegetarian.
Yeah. So would it be better to invest in other things which have a higher ethical?
Well, I don't think these things are investments. They were held for a specific purpose. So, for example, the abattoir was probably about food resilience, or at the time that was 100 years ago. The milk treatment plant, the same sort of thing. You might even car parks. Well, okay, you might say it's got ethical considerations, but then you're saying we shouldn't have people parking. Well, you're charging for them, you're getting revenue, so that's not such a bad thing. One thing I mentioned, just a little side note, is in 1998 the late Con Devitt, our secretary at the time, wrote to the Deputy Prime Minister and said, please don't sell the airport. And a week later, the government nearly fell. You might remember, New Zealand First left the coalition. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Warwick. That's all of the questions.
No other questions? Thank you.
We appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with us today. Thank you. I'd now like to welcome Dan Henry. Dan, you have 10 minutes, including time for questions, if you'd like to leave that. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thanks for having me. I'm choosing to stand and then I can see you all a little easier. I've got my hot cup of democracy services as well. That's what the label's silverware. It's my favourite brew. Called Dan Henry Toka Wingwa. I set up, I'm speaking today on behalf of Predator Free Miramar, which is the local backyard trapping group that we set up some 8 years ago, and speaking to you today about Matai Moana and the proposal for the reserve. Predator Free Miramar is very much in favour of the formation of a reserve at Matai Moana, with the land being vested as such under the Reserves Act 1977. We support option 1, the joint management of that reserve by Taranaki Whānui and the council, and we very much support mana whenua taking that lead role. We welcome the council contributing $750,000 annually to the reserve. And we note that both council and Taranaki Whānui have indicated the importance of the community being involved in contributing to this vision and the formation of a park on this land. We welcome this, as we know the community through its various groups has much to offer to ensure the park is a success. There's already been a great deal of work done by community groups on this land, and it is community groups like Predator Free Miramar that have helped to return bird life to Matai Moana. Other members of the community have also long taken care of this land in other ways, whether it's through grazing the pasture and keeping the weeds down, or walking the tracks and reporting vandalism or hazards, or simply by enjoying the parkland and maintaining a presence there. I know that shortly, I know that by now you'll know that there has been already extensive consultation work done with many groups from across the city seeking input from all quarters about people's visions and aspirations for this area. Cycling, walking, gardening groups, historical and conservation groups, architecture students and faculty from Te Herenga Waka Victoria University, representatives from local businesses and representatives from mana whenua. I know Friends of Miramar Peninsula have also submitted around Matai Moana, and you'll be hearing from them shortly. And they've submitted about the professionally facilitated workshops that were held and the feedback that was collated from those workshops. And all of that work came to the same conclusion, that a reserve that preserves and celebrates the historical, the cultural and the ecologically significant sites here, that is the desired outcome for this land by the community. The proposed council allocation of $750,000 annually is a really good start, but we can probably all agree that we will need more. So I'd like to underline this afternoon the immense potential energy and community goodwill that exists out on the peninsula, just waiting, ready to be harnessed and translated into in-kind help for this proposed reserve. Predator Free Miramar as a group has very strong links with the wider community and can help facilitate this work. I wanted to touch on a couple of specifics in relation to the land use at the moment. One is the livestock. I don't know how many of you have walked out on that land, but there are 25 cows and a couple of horses up there, and that land has been grazed, for nearly 30 years by one person. She's the grazier, she's not grazed it herself. You understand my different meaning there. She's not a vegetarian. But the animals there, they may be few in number, but they are hugely valuable to keeping the grassland and the weeds down, to reduce fire risk, to ensure that the views and sight lines are maintained, and that historic past sites are not enveloped and lost to broom, gorse and pines. And there's really good precedent for this nationally. I think the Auckland Regional Council have upwards of 4 or 5 regional parks that have livestock grazing on them. Some of those are hard-out farming operations where they return a profit, and others, I think, are more the livestock has a land maintenance use. But I think it's easy to assume that that farm animals are a sort of a hazard or a colonial imposition on the land and stand in the way of restoration. But I think that there is, at least in the short to medium term, there's a really good, worthwhile conversation to have around how do we envisage this land in 1,000 years, 500 years, 100 years, and what role might farm animals have to play in that. We're also aware that LINZ is in the process of making the land safe in preparation for handing it on to the new owners or managers. And I understand there were initial desires by LINZ to remove some of the older buildings on the land, but we also learned there's been a good recent decision to retain the corrugated iron hay barn up on the farm, at least in the short term, to allow farming activities to continue. So we really applaud that pragmatic decision making. And just sort of one other point around, I touched on this notion of being present on the land. I think that has a really underrated value. You know, the land has been locked up and fenced off and do not walk here, you know, right now. It still is. I think there are still signs that, you know, ward you off. But because people use it regularly, that has maintained the land to some degree. I know others have submitted on the adjacent corrections owned parcels of land near the site in question. And I know that's not part of the current proposal, but I'd urge council to maybe use their power and influence to lobby LINZ and look at ways of possibly keeping that land in use by people. We walk past that prison regularly doing our trapping activities, and as every day goes on, it falls into a worse state of repair. There's people dumping rubbish there regularly, and I think there are opportunities. I know it's red stickered, and I know that, you know, we have precedent around earthquake risk in the city, but I think that there are ways maybe we could use those buildings at least as a temporary status, whether it's a plant nursery or, you know, there's a basketball court inside the walls of those prison. That would be a perfect little facility for rangatahi in the neighbourhood to, you know, to play and exercise, sheltered by the southerly. I just think we could be a bit lateral and kind of keep that land in use and keep a human presence there to help protect it. We have a proven track record, predator-free Miramar, of building and unifying a community behind a bold vision. And through our 8-year existence, we've worked really closely with Joachim Lehmann's group, Te Motu Kairangi Ecological Restoration. So we're well used to collaboration. If you're looking for cash, I can tell you we don't have any money. But what we do have is a particular set of skills beyond predator trapping, skills acquired over many years working with the community and on the land, and skills that could make us great allies in the creation of this reserve. So ngā mihi nui, thank you very much, and we look forward to getting started.
Right, we do have some questions. The first one being from Pouiwi Hohaia.
Kia ora, Dan. Thank you for that. Really excited that you've supported option one. Just keen to hear a little bit more about what you see partnering with Taranaki Whānui will actually bring to this kaupapa.
I think as I noted, there's a lot of excitement in the community to getting started on this thing. That's been talked about and kind of, I wouldn't even say it's been on the starting blocks. It's been, you know, we've been waiting for more than 10, 15 years for this to happen. So there is a lot of excitement that we might be right there ready to go. And through all the conversations we've had, people are really proud of the history there, the layers of history, not just the concrete gun emplacements, but the power sites and the people who lived there and walked there hundreds of years ago. And there is a real interest in telling those stories, and there's multiple different ways the land is used today. So it's the stories hiding in the landscape that excite the people that we've spoken to.
Nice.
And restoring the mauri is what we've been trying to do, you know, removing the rats, bringing the birds back, you know, Kārearea and Kakariki and Kākara are all visiting regularly. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
Very quick question from Councillor McNulty? No, okay. I think we're out of time, Dan. Thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with us today. I'd now like to welcome Matthew Eden. No, my Matthew, you have 5 minutes And if you'd like to leave any time for questions in there, that's up to you. Thank you.
I'm here to talk about Wellington Water and water done well. I'm in favour of doing the number 2 thing where council takes ownership of the water, because looking at what Fulton Hogan done and Wellington Water at the moment, just seems to be an absolute total mess, and we're just overpaying for something that we shouldn't be paying this much for to have our water infrastructure done. When I look around Wellington and I see how long it takes and how much it costs to fix a Toby, I can't believe it, because I had a personal experience with myself. I had a Toby leak at my place. Fulton Hogan estimated $7,500 to fix the Toby. Had my plumber come in and do it for $750. I know that, I'm in the building industry, by the way. I know that if you get one of those cone trucks, it's $3,500 a day to run a cone truck. Great money if you can get it, but look at how much money we spend on our rates. I mean, our rates are double the price of Auckland for the same value of property. As a ratepayer, we need to get value for money of anyone that's doing the water infrastructure. When I see, I know other contractors who do actually the mains install and how quick they can do it and how little cost can be done by it. I think rather than you guys setting up a new entity, I think you need to start at the beginning with a new entity. You need not to use Wellington Water people at all. And I can look around seeing a few contractors that I know who are big players in the industry. They can get it done on time, at cost, and not at a cost that's going to, basically rape the ratepayer. So I think really, if you're going to bring it back in-house, really needs to be done at a cost. And it doesn't need to make a profit neither, because as a ratepayer, we will be paying for it, whatever needs to be done. And I think, really, in the building industry, I know how you can get things done, and you can get things done at a reasonable cost. Whereas at the moment, everything I see is not at a reasonable cost. And I'd like to know, what are your thoughts regarding bringing it back in-house?
Are you ready for questions now?
I am, yes, I am.
Yes, great. A question from Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks for coming in, Matthew. You said at the beginning of your presentation that you actually don't favour option 2?
I do.
Oh, you do favour option 2?
I think option 2 is the best way forward. You guys at the council need to take control of it, because a hands-off approach with Wellington Water has been a total, excuse my French, cluster F.
Excellent, that's great.
And I know of someone I know who was actually in there for 7 years trying to get a system that would work about where the money was going. In 7 years, they could not figure out where the money was going. Now, if I ran my business like they did, I'd be bankrupt in a heartbeat. And, Wellington Water is just taking the piss. Really, they are. I mean, if you audit them, they don't even know where the money's going.
Yep. Thank you very much, and I agree with you. Thanks.
All right, Councillor Pannett.
Thank you. That was a very powerful example that you just used. Small country, only 5 million people, only so many people have the expertise to deal with our water. Are you talking? So obviously there's some other contractors, but what about key staff who can actually run policy or manage things?
The policy will be driven by you guys. You have a policy already in place for that, I'm assuming? You also, all you need is someone that can deliver the product on time and under budget, right? You could charge by the meter, which is this much and this much, right? Now, the guy that I know came here with £5 in his pocket. He's now worth over 200 million because he works bloody hard. I'm not going to say his name because I don't think that's fair or reasonable because he's not here, but look at all the Irish guys that came over from Ireland and are now very wealthy, and they've done very well out of digging and putting drains in. When I see, as an example, down Wakefield Street at the minute, I don't understand why they're not working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's a main road, and over the sunny days, nobody's there. I think you need to, if you want the city to be vibrant, it's a little bit off topic, you need to tidy it up and get people back into town. Because at the moment, I've got quite a few clients who have commercial property in town. They're losing retail people that don't want to be in town because it's just horrible.
All right, I think we're out of time. Thank you, Matthew. We really appreciate you coming in, sharing your love of the French language with us. All right. I'd now like to welcome Russell Tregonning and on behalf of the Friends of the Miramar Peninsula. And you have 10 minutes, and if you'd like to leave any time for questions, you can do that. Thank you.
Kia ora, councillors. I'm Russell Tregonning and I'm representing Friends of Miramar Peninsula. Our main aim is to protect the northern Miramar Peninsula, also known as Matai Moana or Watts Peninsula. We want a national heritage park there, and we want it gazetted as soon as possible. I'll just point to a few main points of the presentation that you have in front of you in writing. First, essential history. 14 years since Heritage and Culture Minister Chris Finnison, with Wellington's Mayor and the Port Nicholson Block Settlement Trust Chairman, set the ball rolling, proposing the park. Minister Finnison wanted it to be rivaling Vancouver's Stanley Park. It's one of the world's great urban parks, and I've been there, I've seen it. The similarities to the Miramar Peninsula are astounding. It's a peninsula jutting out into the harbour, very like ours, except that we've got a better harbour, I reckon. Our beautiful, sparkling harbour is wonderful, and we can equal Vancouver's park. A native forest. We envisage an eco sanctuary surrounded by Te Whanganui Atara. Our group was initially formed as Save Shelley Bay. We've saved it. They wanted to build a housing estate on climate change prone land with a small, narrow, winding road. It was astounding. We could not believe what we were seeing, and this council supported it. So once that got saved, we're delighted that it was, we turned our sights upwards, because not only did Taranaki Whānui and the Wellington Company want to develop Shelley Bay, they also wanted to develop Matai Moana. They wanted to have 700 to 750 high-rise homes up to 27 metres. They went for the consenting process under COVID-19 fast-tracked, which would have excluded the public. Fortunately, David Parker, who was the Environmental Minister of the Environment, turned it down. So we now have an opportunity to create a wonderful, magnificent jewel in Wellington's crown and to the benefit of the whole nation. I want to just highlight a few points from our written submission. First, we want the whole community involved in decisions about the National Heritage Park. We understand that LINZ and Taranaki Whānui have been having secret negotiations. We want it to be out in the open. We've tried to get the information with OIA requests. We've had heavily redacted, virtually no information. We think that should stop. We've consulted widely over the recent years. We've run public meetings. We've had focused huis with interested citywide and national organisations. I just mentioned a few now. We have worked closely with Victoria University's landscape design students. They've run several excellent public exhibitions under their lecturer Carles Martinet. Their final recommendations are imminent and you'll see them quite soon. Predator-free Miramar, you've already heard from Dan Henry. What they've achieved on Miramar Peninsula is nothing short of spectacular and unique in New Zealand as far as I know. Te Motu Kairangi Miramar Ecological Restoration Group under Joachim Lyman. They've planted tens of thousands of trees and protected wildlife in the area adjacent to the proposed reserve. This is also a fantastic and continuing project. The Miramar prison gardens are a taonga and must be protected. So what's our position? We want all the defence and former corrections land, which includes the old Mount Crawford prison site, to be part of the National Heritage Park. We want it gazetted under the Reserves Act. The time is right for that now. We want your council to put aside the $750,000 contribution to the park, but we do point out that that'll be a drop in the ocean. We'll need a lot more money than that. And so, we want you to insist on a major government financial support to honour the government's publicly announced commitments both in 2011 and 2019 for a National Heritage Park. We want to be heard. We want the creation of a genuinely representative trust to run the park, like the Kōrau Sanctuary Trust. They do that for Zealandia. We want a similar situation. We've been given no details of the LINZ Taranaki Whānui conferences, and we need to know what's going on. We thank you for this opportunity. Any questions? Thanks.
Yes, there are some, the first being from Poiwi Hohaia.
Kia ora, thank you for that. Just trying to get my head around this. So are you willing to work with and recognise Taranaki Whānui as the treaty partner in this relationship?
We've tried to do that. Yes, is the answer. And we've invited them to our huis.
Oh, thank you.
Councillor Young.
Thank you. So thanks for your support of this fantastic idea, concept that, as you say, has been worked on for such a long time. Just a couple of things. Do you know roughly what percentage of native forest there is on the Mate Moana Watts Peninsula? Like 5, 10? Not much, is it?
I don't know. Dan might know better than I.
Okay, well, I can say... Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. So the second question is just thinking about your comparison with Stanley Park and, and the gazetting.
Councillor Young, I've actually got other councillors to ask questions.
First time I've asked a question.
Well, it's sort of one each, but okay, quickly, go.
So on Stanley Park, they have 5 restaurants and 15 food kiosks. Would you anticipate the same sort of thing?
No, I don't want it to that extent. That seems to me to be overkill.
Councillor Chung.
Thanks for coming in, Russell. Much appreciated. I'm concerned about your comment and also Dan's comment earlier that the $750,000 that we would be committed to putting in for the next 5 years will be increased, or you think it won't be enough and will be increased. So that's a bit scary for the ratepayers of Wellington.
Can you ask a question?
What do you think? Yeah. Why do you think that DOC or the regional council would not do a better job and have it remain in central government control?
Well, that's what we want, central government. Yeah, we understand that we don't want to see the ratepayers having to fork out more. We want central government to put their hand up. They've already said we want this, publicly notified, or not notified, but publicly accounted for, both in 2011 and 2019. So, government, please, put up your hand.
Great, thank you. Councillor Pannett.
Thank you for your submission. Do you support or believe that mana whenua do have a particularly important role in?
Yes, definitely.
Right.
They've been there for hundreds of years, right from the time of the early settlement, and we're very supportive of them having a major role.
Under Te Tiriti?
Yes, they're treaty partners. Yes.
I think that's the end of the questions. Thank you, Russell. We appreciate you taking the
much.
time to come and speak with us today. I'd now like to welcome Michael Howden. No, Michael. And you have 5 minutes if you want to leave any time for questions as part of that time. Over to you.
Kia ora koutou. This is my first time presenting to a select committee. I've actually been involved in the water sector professionally for a number of years in a number of different roles, and so feel very passionately about it, but always sort of working at a much lower level. So I thought it would be good to exercise my sort of democratic right, my democratic responsibility, and perhaps give you a chance to ask someone in the water sector if you had any questions, although I'm sure you have plenty of officials that you've consulted in this space. First of all, I'd like to thank you for putting forward a very wise option for a regional model for delivering water services. And I know many of my colleagues feel the same. This is really the best option, and I know some of your colleagues don't feel the same. It has been said this is just going back to the failed model of Wellington Water, and I would say this is very different from Wellington Water. I think it's like comparing a property manager with a property owner. Wellington Water doesn't own the assets, and although that might seem like a technical balance sheet technicality, I think actually it leads to a whole lot of different behaviours. And so I know that in the past they've had to beg, borrow and steal for actually just getting basic investments in place. So I really see what you've proposed as your preferred model as a great step forward in that respect. I would also say, thinking about, as we're moving forward, thinking about the people. I was just at a Water New Zealand event last night, and I was just commenting on the amazing community of water professionals that we have in New Zealand. And people are in that sector because they care either about communities, about the environment, about solving wicked technical engineering problems, or all three of those things. It's been a hard time for the sector, and you would have heard the CEO of Engineering New Zealand talking about we're losing talent because of the uncertainty. So I think we are seeing a path forward at the moment, and I'd really encourage us to be moving forward with that and thinking about, when you're evaluating these options, how much of an impact is it going to have on the sector, and are we just going to be going into areas where there's more uncertainty, more lack of investment, and engineers are moving offshore, and so we have less resources to be able to fix the pipes and build new pipes and plants and the infrastructure and systems and processes that we need. On that note, I think we've seen a great response from Wellington Water in the past couple of years as they've come under increased scrutiny from increased regulation. And I think we've seen the impact and the effectiveness of that as Taumata Arawai, the Water Services Authority, I think they're now referred to, has put the pressure on Wellington Water as we've faced droughts and shortages of water, and they've put the mahi in, and they're moving forward through that transformation. So think of that, and I think that shows us a really good path forward of what a regional water services organisation might look like. I think the last thing I'd say is, I know water. Earlier on in my career, I said, safe drinking water shouldn't be a politically contestable issue, and someone more politically savvy than me just laughed at me. But it shouldn't, and the changes we will see will mean that potentially you have less direct influence in the day-to-day running, but I think this is also an opportunity for you to all lift up. It's not straightforward what needs to be done. You'll have to make decisions. Do we fix the leaky pipes, or do we fix the lack of chlorination? There's going to be some really sticky questions that require community engagement. Leave the sort of the boring stuff to the professionals who love solving those wicked engineering problems. But there's going to be some community engagement that's needed, and I think there's an opportunity for you to operate at that space. And I think the new legislation gives you space for doing that. I think this is just 1 minute. I'm not sure if there's any questions that you might have.
There is one. Councillor McNulty has a question for you.
Thanks for coming in today. You might be aware, so Wellington Water's governance model means that each shareholder, so Wellington Council, Porirua, each has one vote. Do you think with a new regional model that a more proportionate allocation of voting rights would be assisted in better being accountable to its customers and to the residents in the area?
I think if you've got to the point where you're having to rely on proportional voting, you've already lost. And so I'd encourage us as potentially one of the stronger members, but also probably one of the more indebted members of Wellington Water, to be humble in that role. That would be my point.
Thank you so much. It's always nice to see a first-time submitter, and we'd like to encourage you to come back again and talk with us, Michael. Thank you.
Very much.
I believe our last submitter before lunch, Sergio Vinam. Welcome. And you have 5 minutes.
Perfect. Kia ora, everybody. Second time submitter. Same story, really. Pieces of feedback. The first one I gave you last time I was here was I went to the world's most violent seismic city, being Santiago, Chile. No one really spends any money on earthquake preparedness up front. I've just been to the world's... Oh, does anyone know what number Wellington is in terms of seismic activity in the world out of cities? Yeah, there's a prize if you get within 10. Yep. Okay, it's 82 at the moment, but on average it sits around there, so we're nowhere near the world's most earthquake-prone city, like nowhere near. So I went last week to the world's most earthquake-prone city, which is Tokyo. Their total budget allocation for Safety City, which is all of their capital initiatives, is 4.5% of the budget, so a subset of that is earthquake-related. So somehow we've become this ridiculous total outlier in how much we spend on earthquake-related preparedness. So that's my first point. I don't actually see any reason why that's the case other than seismic hysteria. I can't think of any other term. Last time I accused you guys of being held hostage by engineering personnel both inside and outside the building. I still believe that's true. So specifically in terms of the long-term plan, I just think killing the earthquake hysteria would be a good thing to do, to say actually we're not going to worry about that because there's not very much we can do, and no other city in the world is as paranoid about earthquakes as Wellington is. I dare you to go and find one. That's what I've been doing over the last few months. So that's kind of my first ask, if you like, is to think, are we being hysterical, and why are we the only ones who are like this? Los Angeles, which is in the top 10 globally, you'll all recognise it as a city of note. They have less than 0.5% of their capital budget go to proactive earthquake-related expenses, right? So again, we're just so far order of magnitudes removed from the mean on what's normal. And I'd be interested to hear from you guys why we've got that way. I've had opinions from various councillors on the rationale for it, some of it being blamed on central government and centralised regulatory things, some to do with internal paranoia and feathering nests and all of that sort of stuff. But I'd be interested in your feedback on that. And then the second point I made in my submission, which is a bit crude, was everything seems to be out of order of magnitude too expensive. Does anyone here know, more or less, again, prize Nicola, how much it cost in $2024 to build Auckland Harbour Bridge in 1959? Order of magnitude. 1959, but in $2024. Yeah, it's $245 million, so your order of magnitude, you're 2 times off, right? So cleaning up our library, which didn't really need strengthening, cost more than building Auckland Harbour Bridge. So again, we're doing something very, very wrong in how we do capital projects. They are order of magnitudes out of what they should be. There's all sorts of allegations around, again, feathering nests, all that sort of stuff. I don't know any of the details. All I know is that the capital expenditure is out of whack with anything they do. Again, I was in Tokyo last week. Creating buildings in Tokyo, the largest city on the planet, is cheaper on a per-foot basis than it is in Wellington. That is just extraordinary. I don't really know why. Maybe some of you have got opinions on that. So that's my verbal submission. Happy to take questions, observations, otherwise.
Thank you. First question from Pauiwi Kelly.
Hey, thank you for your presentation. It was really interesting. I'm interested in your view about the position that Wellington City Council find themselves, though, with regard to insurance. So do you know about our...
I know of some of the things. I don't know all.
So have you got a view?
So again, I'm not a qualified professional on that, but I think at some point, and I'm on various boards of companies, so I'm in software companies, so at some point some of our cyber security insurances, because of the transactional volume or whatever, become exorbitant and we can't actually insure to the levels that we would as a bunch of directors. We've got to make choices around the level of coverage we have. Right, those are trade-offs. As a director, I've got to look after the best interests of shareholders, and sometimes the answer is we can't be fully insured for this. I don't see why a city should be different.
Just a quick follow-up.
There are things we cannot insure for, and we should be comfortable not being insured for it. Okay. Right? The answer isn't always cover everything to the nth degree, just like the answer isn't tear down any building that has a fracture or something in it. You've got to make trade-offs all the time. And so I'm on boards, you guys are aboard. Trade-offs is what I'm asking for. Yep.
Very quick question from Councillor Brown.
Do you know how many people died in the worst earthquake that has struck Tokyo in the last 100 years?
I have no idea. But
Just have a
obviously
guess.
they've had
Just have a guess. You've asked us for a few guesses. You have a guess.
Yeah, several 100,000 people. Yeah.
No, you're out by a large order of magnitude, actually. But it was 140,000.
All right, we're out of time. We're out of time. Thank you, Sergio.
Okay,
we appreciate you coming in and speaking with us. Councillors, we are now going to our lunch break. So we.